The dismissive laugh from Security Chief Marcus Reynolds echoed through Terminal C as he watched the woman on the monitors. She sat perfectly still in the detention room, her weathered hands folded, her grey-streaked hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Nothing about her suggested danger, yet something about her calm composure in the face of interrogation unsettled him in ways he couldn't explain. "Ma'am, you've been flagged by our behavioural detection system," Officer Janet Collins said, entering the sterile room with a clipboard. "Multiple anomalies in your movement patterns, suspicious route through the terminal, and you've been observed studying security protocols." The woman looked up with steady grey eyes that seemed to catalogue everything in the room. "I was waiting for my flight," she said simply, her voice carrying a quiet authority that made Collins pause momentarily. "From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story intrigues you, consider subscribing for more tales of hidden strength and unexpected revelations." Diana Reeves had arrived at Reagan National Airport 3 hours early, not out of anxiety, but out of habit. 30 years in covert operations had taught her that early arrival provided crucial observation time. She moved through the terminal with practiced invisibility, her civilian clothes carefully chosen to be forgettable: khaki pants, a navy cardigan, comfortable walking shoes. What she hadn't anticipated was the airport's new behavioural detection system, designed to identify potential threats through movement analysis. The AI flagged her systematic observation patterns, her professional awareness of exits and security positions, her unconscious habit of maintaining sightlines to all entry points. "Subject shows advanced situational awareness," the system had noted. "Movement patterns consistent with surveillance training. Recommend immediate detention." Security Chief Reynolds had initially dismissed the alert. The woman looked like someone's grandmother, hardly the profile of a terrorist operative. But protocol was protocol, especially with the heightened security following recent international tensions. "Bring her in for questioning," he'd ordered, settling in to watch what he assumed would be a brief apologetic interview with a confused civilian. Officer Collins studied the woman across the metal table. Diana sat with perfect posture, her hands relaxed, her breathing measured. Most detainees showed signs of stress, fidgeting, elevated speech patterns, defensive body language. This woman displayed none of those indicators. "Can you explain why you were photographing security checkpoints?" Collins asked, consulting her notes. "I wasn't photographing anything," Diana replied calmly. "Our cameras show you holding up your phone multiple times near restricted areas." Diana's slight smile held no humour. "I was checking the time. My watch stopped working this morning." Reynolds, monitoring from the observation room, leaned forward. Something about her responses felt rehearsed, too precise. He activated the intercom. "Collins, ask her about the route she took through the terminal." Collins nodded. "Ma'am, you took an unusual path to your gate. Can you explain why you visited the cargo area and the restricted access hallway?" "I was looking for a restroom," Diana said without hesitation. "The ones near my gate were being cleaned." "The cargo area doesn't have public restrooms," Collins pointed out. Diana shrugged. "I realized that when I got there. That's why I left." Reynolds frowned. Her story was plausible, but something felt off. Normal travelers showed embarrassment when caught in mistakes. This woman showed no emotional response whatsoever. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some additional identification," Collins said, returning to the room with a stern expression. "Your behaviour has raised some red flags." Diana reached into her purse and produced a standard driver's license from Virginia. Collins examined it carefully, noting the address in Arlington and the unremarkable details. Everything appeared legitimate. "What's the purpose of your travel today?" "Visiting my sister in Denver," Diana replied. "How long has it been since you've seen her?" "About 6 months." Reynolds watched the exchange, growing more frustrated. The woman's answers were textbook perfect, specific enough to be believable, general enough to be unverifiable. It was exactly how trained operatives were taught to handle interrogation. He made a decision that would change everything. "Collins, run a deep background check. Full database search." 20 minutes later, Collins returned with a confused expression. "Sir, we have a problem. The background check is strange." "What do you mean strange?" "Her records are there, but they're minimal. Employment history shows administrative work for various government contractors. No social media presence, no digital footprint beyond the basics. It's like she's been deliberately scrubbed. Reynolds felt his pulse quicken. Bring in Agent Morrison from TSA. This might be federal. Agent Sarah Morrison arrived within minutes, her federal credentials giving her immediate authority over the situation. She was young, ambitious, and eager to prove herself in the male-dominated world of airport security. "What do we have?" she asked, reviewing the file. "Suspicious behavior, evasive answers, and a background that doesn't add up," Reynolds explained. "She's either very clean or very dirty." Morrison entered the interrogation room with confidence. Diana looked up as she introduced herself, and for just a moment Morrison thought she saw something flicker in the woman's eyes. Recognition? Amusement? "Ma'am, I'm Agent Morrison with TSA. I understand you've been detained for suspicious activity." "I've been sitting here for 2 hours," Diana said calmly. "I'm going to miss my flight." "That depends on how cooperative you are," Morrison replied, settling into the chair across from her. "Let's start with your employment history. You've worked for several government contractors. What kind of work?" "Administrative support, filing, data entry, scheduling." "For 30 years? It's honest work." Morrison leaned forward. "Ma'am, people don't develop the kind of situational awareness you've displayed by filing papers. Where did you receive training?" Diana's expression didn't change. "I don't know what you mean." In the observation room, Reynolds watched as Morrison pressed harder. The agent was good, but she was dealing with someone who seemed completely unflappable. Every question was met with the same calm responses, the same unwavering composure. "Sir," Officer Collins said suddenly, pointing at her computer screen, "we've got multiple federal agencies trying to access her file. FBI, NSA, Department of Defense. They're all being blocked." Reynolds stared at the screen. "Blocked how?" "Classification level above our access. The system won't even tell us who has jurisdiction." Diana checked her watch, a movement so subtle that the cameras barely caught it. She had been patient, but time was running short. The operation couldn't proceed without her input, and delays would compromise national security. "Agent Morrison," she said quietly, "I'd like to make my phone call now." Morrison scoffed. "This isn't a criminal arrest, ma'am. You're being detained for security screening." "Nevertheless, I have the right to contact my attorney." Morrison exchanged glances with the one-way mirror, then shrugged. "Fine. One call. Local only." Diana was escorted to a secure phone booth where all conversations could be monitored. She dialed a number from memory, 10 digits that would change everything. The phone was answered on the first ring. "Oversight," came a crisp male voice. "It is Sapphire Phoenix requesting immediate extraction," Diana said quietly. "Location Reagan National, Terminal C, Security Office. Authentication code November 77 Alpha Tango." "Confirmed, Sapphire Phoenix. Initiating emergency protocols. ETA 12 minutes. She hung up and returned to the interrogation room, where Morrison was waiting with increased hostility. "Who did you call?" Morrison demanded. "My lawyer," Diana replied, settling back into her chair with the first hint of a smile she'd shown all day. Reynolds was reviewing surveillance footage when his radio crackled to life. "Control, this is Tower. We have an unscheduled aircraft requesting emergency landing clearance." He frowned, switching to air traffic control frequency. "What kind of aircraft?" "Military transport. They're claiming presidential priority override." Reynolds felt ice form in his stomach. Presidential priority was a classification he'd heard about but never encountered. It meant only one thing: national security at the highest levels. Morrison continued her interrogation, unaware of the developing situation. "Ma'am, your phone call has been traced to a number that doesn't exist in any database. Care to explain that?" Diana simply waited, her eyes occasionally drifting to the small window that showed a slice of the tarmac outside. "You know what I think?" Morrison leaned back in her chair. "I think you're running some kind of con. False identity, elaborate backstory, mysterious phone numbers. You're probably wanted for something." "Agent Morrison," Diana said softly, "in about 8 minutes, you're going to understand exactly who I am. I suggest you prepare yourself." Morrison laughed. "Is that a threat?" "It's advice." The roar of jet engines suddenly filled the terminal as a massive aircraft approached the runway. Reynolds watched through the control room windows as what appeared to be a military transport touched down and immediately began taxiing toward their terminal. "Sir," Collins called out urgently, "that's not just any military aircraft. That's Air Force Two." Reynolds felt his world shift. Air Force Two was the call sign for any military aircraft carrying the Vice President of the United States. What was it doing at Reagan National, unannounced? The aircraft came to a stop directly outside Terminal C. The engines wound down, but they didn't shut off, indicating this was a brief stop. The rear cargo door opened and figures in military gear began emerging. "Are those," Collins began, "Navy SEALs?" Reynolds whispered, recognizing the distinctive gear and tactical positioning. In the interrogation room, Morrison was still pressing her questions when the first explosions echoed through the terminal. Not bombs, flashbangs designed to disorient and control crowds. Diana stood up smoothly. "Agent Morrison, I need you to step away from the door." "Sit down," Morrison commanded, her hand moving toward her sidearm. "The door," Diana repeated calmly, "or you'll be in their way." The interrogation room door exploded inward as two figures in full tactical gear entered with military precision. Morrison spun around, her weapon half drawn, but froze as she found herself facing Navy SEALs with weapons trained on her. "Stand down, Agent," the lead operative commanded. "Federal override. We're here for Sapphire Phoenix." Morrison's eyes darted between the SEALs and Diana, who had remained perfectly calm throughout the dramatic entrance. "Sapphire Phoenix?" The lead SEAL stepped forward and, to Morrison's complete shock, rendered a perfect military salute to the woman they'd been interrogating. "Commander Reeves," he said with unmistakable respect. "Command sends apologies for the delay. We have a situation requiring your immediate attention." Diana returned the salute with practiced precision. "Status report, Chief." "Hostile intelligence operation detected at the Port Authority. They've compromised our shipping manifests and are moving to intercept the morning cargo flights. We need your authorization to proceed with countermeasures." Morrison stared in disbelief as the woman she'd been treating as a suspicious civilian suddenly transformed before her eyes. Diana's posture straightened, her voice took on clear command authority, and her entire presence shifted from invisible to commanding. "Time frame?" Diana asked. 18 minutes until the compromised flights reach their targets." Diana nodded. "Chief, establish a perimeter. Agent Morrison, you're going to need to evacuate this section of the terminal." Reynolds burst into the interrogation room, his face flushed with panic and confusion. What the hell is going on here? Who authorized? He stopped mid-sentence as he saw Diana standing with the SEALs, clearly in command of the situation. "Sir," one of the operatives said to Diana, "we have confirmation from CENTCOM. You're cleared for full disclosure to necessary personnel." Diana nodded, then turned to Reynolds and Morrison. "Security Chief Reynolds, Agent Morrison. I'm Commander Diana Reeves, United States Navy SEALs. I'm also the current Director of Maritime Security Operations for the Eastern Seaboard." Morrison's weapon fell to her side. That's not possible. You're just..." "A middle-aged woman in civilian clothes," Diana finished. "Yes, that's rather the point." Reynolds found his voice. "Your identification showed you as a civilian contractor." "Because that's my cover identity. I've been operating under deep civilian cover for the past 3 years, investigating security vulnerabilities in our transportation infrastructure." Diana's eyes hardened slightly. Today's detention was unplanned, but it's revealed some interesting gaps in our security protocols. The lead SEAL approached Diana with a tactical tablet. "Commander, we need your authorization codes for the counter-operation." Diana took the device and rapidly entered a complex sequence. The screen flashed green, displaying clearance levels that neither Reynolds nor Morrison had ever seen before. "Chief Petty Officer Hawkins," Diana addressed the lead SEAL formally, "execute Operation Clean Sweep, full maritime interdiction protocols." "Aye, Commander." What followed was a masterclass in operational command that left both airport security personnel speechless. Diana coordinated with multiple agencies through encrypted communications, issued orders to Coast Guard vessels, and directed air support operations, all while standing in an airport interrogation room. "CENTCOM, this is Sapphire Phoenix," she spoke into a secure communicator. "I have positive identification on 3 compromised vessels. Authorization to engage under Maritime Security Protocol 77 Alpha. The response crackled through the device. Sapphire Phoenix, you are cleared hot. Repeat, cleared hot. Morrison watched in fascination as Diana orchestrated a complex operation involving multiple branches of the military. The woman, who had seemed like an unremarkable civilian, was directing operations that clearly involved national security at the highest levels. Agent Morrison, Diana said suddenly, I'm going to need you to coordinate with local law enforcement. We have intelligence indicating potential ground-based assets in the DC metropolitan area. Aye? Yes, ma'am, Morrison replied automatically, her earlier hostility completely evaporated. Reynolds stepped forward hesitantly. Commander, how can airport security assist? Diana studied him for a moment. Your behavioral detection system actually performed well today. It identified me as someone with advanced training. The problem wasn't the technology. It was the assumption that such training automatically indicated a threat. Through the windows of the interrogation room, they could see military aircraft landing and taking off with increasing frequency. The supposedly routine airport had become a command center for a major security operation. Commander, Chief Hawkins reported, Coast Guard has intercepted the first vessel. Manifests confirm Chinese intelligence operatives attempting to access critical shipping data. Diana nodded. And the aerial assets? 2 cargo flights diverted to secure airfields, contents being analysed by hazmat teams. Morrison found herself drawn into the operation despite her confusion. Commander, what exactly were they trying to accomplish? Diana glanced at her while monitoring multiple communication channels. Systematic intelligence gathering on our supply chain vulnerabilities. If successful, they could have identified weaknesses in our critical infrastructure that would take years to correct. And you knew this was happening? We've been tracking increased intelligence activity for months. Today's operation was designed to catch them in the act while feeding them false information. Diana's slight smile held no warmth. Your detention actually provided perfect cover for the final phase. Reynolds realized the implications. You let yourself be detained on purpose? Not exactly, but once it happened, I adapted the situation to our advantage. My presence here drew their attention away from our actual countermeasures. 2 hours later, the crisis had been resolved. Multiple foreign operatives were in custody, compromised intelligence networks had been neutralized, and potential attacks on critical infrastructure had been prevented. Diana stood in the airport security office, now revealed in her true capacity as one of the Navy's most senior special operations commanders. The transformation was remarkable, the same physical person, but carrying herself with unmistakable authority. Commander, Reynolds said carefully, I owe you an apology for the treatment you received. Diana shook her head. Your team followed protocol correctly. Suspicious behavior should be investigated. The issue isn't that you detained me, it's that the system didn't recognize legitimate authority when it encountered it. Morrison approached, still clearly shaken by the day's revelations. Ma'am, how many others like you are operating in civilian cover? That's classified, Agent Morrison, but you should assume that any unusual behavior you encounter might have legitimate explanations you're not cleared to know about. Diana began gathering her minimal belongings. Chief Hawkins, what's our transportation status? Air Force 2 is standing by, Commander. CENTCOM is requesting immediate debrief. As Diana prepared to leave, Reynolds found himself with questions he knew he probably couldn't ask. Commander, will we see you again? Unlikely. My cover at this location has been compromised. I'll be reassigned. She paused at the door. But Chief Reynolds, Agent Morrison, remember today. The most dangerous threats rarely announce themselves. Sometimes the most important people are the ones you don't notice until it's too late. Morrison stepped forward. Commander, for what it's worth, I'm glad we were wrong about you. Diana's expression softened slightly. Agent Morrison, you have good instincts. Trust them, but remember that the world is more complex than our training sometimes prepares us for. With that, she walked out of the security office, escorted by her SEAL team. Through the windows, they watched as she boarded Air Force 2, which immediately began taxiing for takeoff. 6 months later, the story of the airport commander had become legend among transportation security personnel. Details varied in the telling, but the core message remained consistent. The most important people were often the ones you least expected. Agent Morrison, now promoted to senior staff, kept a small note on her desk. Question assumptions, verify threats, remember complexity. It served as a daily reminder of the day she almost arrested one of America's most important covert operatives. Security Chief Reynolds implemented new protocols based on that day's lessons. His staff was trained to recognize that suspicious behavior might have legitimate explanations, and that true threats often came disguised as ordinary citizens. Neither ever saw Commander Diana Reeves again, but occasionally one of them would notice an unremarkable person moving through their terminal with just a bit too much awareness, and they would remember the woman who had taught them that the most effective guardians were often invisible until the moment they were needed most. The lesson resonated beyond airport security. In a world of hidden threats and covert operations, the line between protector and threat was often thinner than anyone realized. Sometimes the person you suspected of being dangerous was actually the one keeping you safe. From which city in the world are you watching this story today? Have you ever encountered someone who seemed ordinary but carried themselves with unusual awareness? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more stories about the hidden guardians who protect us without recognition or reward.